They're tiny, but mighty. And when hundreds of thousands join forces, they can think, move, and act as one massive superorganism.
It breathes like an organism. It reproduces like an organism. It behaves much more like, say, a human body.
This humble little ant is a growing global superpower, spreading across the world and under our feet. Discover how this tiny animal genius isn't so little after all. Ants are one of nature's greatest success stories. They're what some call a superorganism. That's when a group of individuals band together and act like one single being. But how can millions of tiny minds get totally in sync?
The most amazing thing about ant behavior is that it even happens at all. Each one of these ants has the potential to be an individual, to go off and do her own thing, yet they don't. And figuring out why ants do that rather than going it alone is a very key question in ant science.
To find out, we're using the Frankencam, a remote-controlled macro camera, to supersize the ants and enter their secret society. Up this close, ants will reveal behavior that was once almost impossible to see. We'll find out how millions of brains can be better than one. All ants are social insects, living and working together. It's what has made them such a success. They're everywhere. But some species are just much more social than others. And when they are, they explode by the thousands. Like these long-legged ants, one of the most common ants in the North American desert. Even entomologist Alex Wild is impressed by their power in numbers.
These are long-legged ants. They're a really common species in the Sonoran Desert. And as you can tell by their name, they're quite leggy and they're pretty fast. And the thing that these guys do is find stuff that's out there in the desert fast, and they bring it back before anyone else has a shot at it.
But just how does a city of 3,000 workers, all female at that, operate? Dr. Wild's Frankencam dives underground to find out. It sounds like a royal society, an industrious, highly organized city run by a queen. But this queen has only one job: to lay eggs. She doesn't have to worry about much else. Each of her 3,000 dedicated workers is assigned a very specific job. It makes for a more organized system, but it comes at a cost. Workers have to give up queenly ambition.
With ants, the challenge is getting the workers to abandon their own reproduction in order to help the colony as a whole and help the queen reproduce.
But the workers don't always obey the rules. Each of them can reproduce, if they dare.
That's, from the perspective of the rest of the ants, cheating, and it undermines the cohesiveness of the colony.
This worker is getting ready to lay eggs. But the change in her body creates a telltale odor. Her sisters sniff her out. They wrestle her to the ground and hold her down for up to 3 days. She's not harmed, but her eggs shrink. It's what's best for the whole colony.
When an individual worker decides to selfishly start laying eggs, that is a cancer to the superorganism. An ant colony has an immune system against cheaters. Worker policing is similar to the body's own anti-cancer defenses.
The crisis is averted and the workers go back to collecting food. But as dawn approaches, there's a new problem. A better armed and better organized neighbor is after the same food. A dispute over resources leads to a clash of civilizations. On the desert floor, a mesquite seed sparks a battle between an infantry of long-legged ants and the heavily armed red harvester ants. They're equipped with stingers and the most powerful venom of any insect in the world. Reinforcements continue to pour out from the harvester nest, and eventually, the long-legged ants have no choice but to retreat. They're out-equipped and outnumbered. Harvesters are simply bigger and badder on the superorganism scale.
Unlike long-legged ants, this colony of red harvester ants is, in my opinion, a superorganism. And I say that because these individual workers do not reproduce. The future of the genes that they carry with them has to flow through the queen. They function very much as cells, individual cells of a larger organism.
All of their energy is channeled into the queen and her newly hatching eggs. This is the family's next generation. With temporary wings passed down from their wasp cousins, they fly to faraway places to create new, growing colonies. Some fly to remote parts of the Arizona desert. Others start vibrant, buzzing colonies right in the middle of town. Here in Tucson, Arizona, millions and millions of sprawling ant metropolises lie just beneath our feet.
We might not notice them because the ants themselves are so small. But on a typical city block, there might be tens or hundreds or even thousands of ant colonies, all going about their own business, pretty much ignoring us the way we ignore them.
For harvester ants, business is good. Without babies to worry about, workers have more time to simply work. It looks like chaos, but
it's actually more organized than it might seem. First, there are nest maintenance workers, picking up little pebbles, moving them around. There are patrollers, who are generally milling about.
And foragers are always on the hunt.
We don't think that these ants are able to recognize their individual nest mates. That is, they don't know Frank and Bob and Susie.
But they're very good at counting and smelling.
Foragers smell different from nest maintenance workers, and those smell different from the guards. And so if they measure returning foragers at a particular speed, at a particular pace, they'll know to either go out if there's a lot of food coming in, or if there's not, to stay home.
But a superorganism has more than daily chores to do. What about the bigger decisions in life? Like when and where to move, or how to handle a food shortage. How do millions of ants ever agree on dinner, let alone anything at all? Communication is key. Central America's army ants are an organized force in constant motion. Dr. Sean O'Donnell studies all the ants in this Costa Rican forest. But army ants are in a league of their own.
This is one of the supreme examples of superorganismic development in insect societies that we know of.
They have some of the biggest colonies of any kind of social insect, and they move with an intensity, you might almost say a ferocity, that's hardly ever matched in the animal kingdom.
These ants never stop moving, and getting a clear view of them is next to impossible. That's where the remote-controlled Frankencam comes in handy. It flies above the ants, getting up close and personal detail of both their biology and their behavior. Sean can identify exactly which size and shape of ants are doing what job. Each worker belongs to a different caste or group within the colony, much like a human cell belongs to a distinct organ. And each caste or organ performs its distinct job. Big soldiers armed with fierce mandibles keep guard, while smaller foragers march into the forest. They're like the arms of this superorganism, reaching out into the forest to grab its food.
Right now we're in the middle of one of the most spectacular sights in the rainforest. This is a swarm raid of army ants. The ants have poured out of their bivouac, probably starting about 6:30 this morning.
But what's remarkable is that army ants are nearly blind. No one really knows where they're going. Unless, that is, they heighten their senses. They must pick up tiny bits of information from around them. Moisture, vibration, the scent of prey, and in turn leave a trail of chemicals behind for others to follow.
Interacting with each other almost constantly. There's very little time that passes when a single ant doesn't touch a nestmate as they're sweeping through the forest.
It's a network almost as intricate as the connections in a human brain. There is no doubt there is power in numbers. The group can take down insects much larger than them. And their powerful stings inject digestive chemicals that dissolve tissue and turn it into mush. Their captor simply falls apart into smaller pieces for easy transport back to the colony. Army ants have no nest, only a massive mobile swarm of bodies. For 2 weeks, it has rested here while the queen lays her eggs. But it's now time to undertake an epic move, to find fresh hunting grounds. Shortly before dusk, the superorganism begins to stir, and the army ant colony begins to move on. It's like everyone in Manhattan packing up and relocating 50 miles away, on foot. Scouts select a site for the new camp. They start to link legs. And as more and more ants arrive, they join the chain. Before the end, 500,000 ants create the skin and skeleton of a giant, protecting the queen and her young inside. An army ant colony is one of Earth's greatest superorganisms. But this forest hides another ant society. Even more complex, but far more peaceful. The leafcutter ants. If army ants are like a single predator, then this is a single, giant herbivore. Like their name suggests, they cut and eat leaves. Sister ants by the millions, all born to one queen, and all in service to one enormous colony.
This surprising clearing in the understory of the rainforest is the result of the work of leafcutter ants. What we're looking at here is the surface of a huge nest. This is soil that's been excavated up from underground, and it's been done by millions of workers that are toiling away under my feet right now.
Below ground lies an ant city as big as a school bus. A vast network of arteries links hundreds of separate chambers. Each room has a specific purpose, and each ant has a specific job to do. Leafcutters create the most specialized workforce of all ants. Scouts are the eyes of the superorganism, searching for that perfect leaf. They leave a scent trail behind them so the foragers can come collect their prize. Nice, crisp, and healthy. Exactly what they're after. Big forager ants clip the leaves into portable sections. And smaller inspectors check the leaves for dangerous bacteria that could ruin their meal. The first job done, the foragers lift their clippings and pass them down into the belly of their nest. But after all this heavy lifting, they don't eat the leaves. They don't care too much for their greens, and instead prefer the funky taste of fungus. The leaves nourish the fungus feeds the ants. It's a win-win situation. Maybe we humans could learn a little about farming from these agricultural ants. After all, they've been doing it for 50 million years. But if the colony is viewed as a superorganism, the fungus is just another part of the digestive system. It acts like the acid in our stomachs, breaking down the leaves into a form of energy the ants, the cells of the organism, can use. Each fungus garden grows to about the size of a head of lettuce and weighs about a pound. A single colony can hold over 100 gardens. To these ants, it's a massive skyscraper city of edible goodness. But where there is food, there is waste, and some unlucky members of the caste system have the dirty job of clearing it out. They are banished to the bowels of the city. Foragers, gardeners, sanitation workers. All of these individual ants are part of a single metabolism. This supremely organized society could only be achieved through total cooperation. And they cooperate because they recognize each other as members of the same reproductive organism. Whether it's a complex society of leafcutters or smaller colonies like harvester ants, sisters of the same nest cooperate. Ants from different nests are mortal enemies, even if they're the same exact species. This competition helps keep ant populations in balance. But some ants have managed to overcome this rule, merging superorganisms into supercolonies, with the power to conquer the world. This quiet street in Barcelona, Spain, has been occupied by invaders. Tiny, unassuming, and wholly unstoppable Argentine ants. As the name suggests, they don't belong outside of South America. But now, they've taken over. With a little help from us humans, they've become the most widely distributed ants on Earth. From their homeland, they stowed away in cargo ships. To Europe, North America, even Japan and New Zealand. Our irrigation and development give these invaders an ideal habitat. And with no natural predators to keep them in check, their populations exploded. But it wasn't all luck. They could never have spread so quickly without a little smarts as well. Instead of fighting, neighboring colonies form peace treaties and join forces. Argentine ants can live miles apart from each other, in separate colonies, but they don't recognize that they're different. They all act like they're the same, creating a massive supercolony, stretching 3,700 miles along the Mediterranean coast, and beyond. Ants from Japan to California to Europe all belong to the same supercolony. But in North America, there's another rival ant superorganism on the scene. Fire ants. They do more than form an army of allies. The colonies completely merge into one nest under one queen, as one gigantic superorganism. Fire ants came from South America to the United States. Once there, they spread like a plague, invading homes and attacking livestock. They have all the advantages of a top superorganism. Sterile workers, a system of organized labor, and a network of chemical communication. But they also get a lot of help from us. This habitat in Central Florida is hostile to most organisms, except fire ants. And they love land that has been disturbed, like this building site. Biologist Walter Schinkel expects that they've already seized this ground.
When we turn the forests of this area into parking lots and lawns and all kinds of open areas, we make the perfect habitat for fire ants. And this site here, where we are, will attract colony-founding fire ant queens by the thousands.
The infestation starts just like any other ant colony. A fertile fire ant queen mates, digs a burrow, and lays her eggs. But this is where the similarity ends. What happens next is the secret to the fire ant supercolony. 3 weeks after mating, the young queen has the makings of a colony. And if she moves fast, she could build an empire. The first generation is a sisterhood of tiny workers called minims. They immediately have to care for the next round of young. But the queen is also desperate for food. Lucky for her, fire ants know how to get it fast. Just about anything will do. When a forager finds a morsel, she runs back to the nest, leaving a trail of pheromones. When she arrives, the mix of pheromones and food odor gets everyone excited. And they're off. Dozens of her sisters race down the trail to grab the meal before anything else can. But food is not all they're after. They found a rival nest, and they walk right in. Fire ants don't have many manners. They're really only here for one selfish reason. This is a mass kidnapping. The raiders take the young back to the stronger nest. When the weaker colony realizes it's defeated, the workers surrender and help the winning side. Even the vanquished queen follows the scent trails of her children and joins her conquerors. If the weaker nest were allowed to grow, it would eventually compete. A losing situation for all. Instead, the surviving nest just got a lot bigger. In the nest of their captors, the kidnapped eggs hatch, mature into adults, and are welcomed as one big, happy family.
It's a very confusing and dynamic process that can last for anywhere from days to weeks. I saw one raid that lasted for a whole month and included ultimately 80 nests that I saw.
After many raids, the nest is full of workers, and many queens, all laying eggs. The colony grows at a rapid pace. But this doesn't end happily ever after. It's just the calm before the storm. The queens begin to fight for top ranks. And for the good of the colony, the workers revolt. They decide which queen will reproduce for them, sometimes even turning against their own mothers. Rejected queens meet an ugly end. Over time, ants from dozens of colonies combine under one queen into the ultimate fire ant superorganism. Using this strategy, fire ants can seize new territory and spread faster than we can stop them. If we have a problem with ants, it's a problem we created. Their societies are hardwired for efficiency and expansion, destined to dominate everywhere they live. From city street, to rainforest, to desert. And it's lucky for us they do.
A study done in eastern North America showed that insects dropped on the forest floor disappeared within 3 minutes, and 100% of them were taken by ants. Almost everything out there gets recycled through the ants at some point. They really are hugely important.
Ants are our ultimate trash compactor. We tend to ignore them because they're everywhere. But they're everywhere because they're so successful at doing what they do. Getting millions of minds to think, work, and live as one Their genius.